Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Christina and I am a genre-bending literary writer. And a few months ago, I did a video talking about my thoughts on grad school, and I said that was part one. So this is part two, and I'm mostly going to talk about what happened in the 10 years after I graduated from grad school and sort of the ups and downs of navigating publishing after you leave the sort of warm embrace of school. But before I do that, I do want to sort of backtrack a little bit, and I will link that first video in the description box below so that if you haven't watched it, go watch it. There I went into depth about why I chose the school I did, how much I paid for it, and, my general thoughts about what happened while I was in school, both the good and the bad. And I just want to backtrack a little bit because I want to touch on something in that video, which was having people that you don't know who have no skin in the game, whether or not you succeed or fail, exposing them to your writing, or basically coming together with them in a writing workshop. Sorry, I have a little bit of a cold, so I might sound a little congested. So, when you get into these environments where strangers are basically judging your writing, it can be a little intimidating. Now, over the years before I went to grad school, I did sort of local writing workshops, and I would show my stories, and I was writing a novel at the time too. So I showed a couple chapters of my novel and I would get feedback there. Also, when I was in undergrad, I took a couple of creative writing classes, and so I had a little bit of feedback there. So I was kind of used to it. I was kind of used to strangers judging my writing. But the problem that I had when I went to these local writing workshops, workshops that were more community based, was that inevitably there would be a lot more people there who had never written before ever. They would always say, "Oh, this is the first time I've taken a creative writing course," or "This is the first time I've ever been exposed." And there's nothing wrong with that. I encourage anybody who wants to take a community writing class, please go take one. But it got a little frustrating when I was taking these classes, and the first time it happens, I think I was 23, about 24, and then I took another one at 25, and then I took another one around maybe 26 or 27, something like that. I kept progressing in the classes, in the community classes, but the classes were not progressing. I was writing short stories, writing a novel, and I still was in class with people who had never written before ever. And after a while, it just became a little frustrating because I was like, I want to take classes with people who want to be professional writers, not people who are doing this as a hobby. And I realized that the fault was not with the community classes I was taking. The fault was with me. I was not going to classes that were rigorous enough for me. And that was one of the reasons in my early 20s I started to seek out grad schools. But by then I knew I was a genre writer, and with a literary and genre blending type writer. And all the grad schools I looked at weren't really catering to that need. So I put it off for a few more years, and then in 2011 I started school at Johns Hopkins. And being in that environment where you were around people who did want to be writers, it was rigorous enough for me, was something that really helped me solidify my writing. So I want to just emphasize that being in a writing class is great, but if your skill level progresses past what those classes offer, then at some point you're going to have to make a decision. Do you want to keep pouring money into this, or do you want to stop and reevaluate where you want to put your money? I still sometimes get emails, and I get stuff on social media, because that's what the algorithm is doing now, that will show me writing conferences and this and that. And I'll go to the website to look at what they're offering, and the writing conference is not really offering me anything that I actually think is useful for me. It's not that the writing conference is bad. It's just I don't need to figure out how to submit my stories. I know how to submit stories. So I don't need to sit in on that level. Sometimes I think a lot of these writing conferences are for people that are not necessarily um, further along in their writing career. They're still kind of at the very beginning stages. I would not consider myself a beginning writer, but I don't really think I'm an advanced writer either. But, so some conferences I see, I'm like, ooh, yeah, I would definitely want to do that. Like I would go to AWP, but it's in California this year. So I'm not getting on a plane anytime soon. But if it was at like Philadelphia, or it was back in DC, like it was in, I think it was 2017, I would go to AWP. That was pretty great. So I just wanted to backtrack on that about being in classes with people who have no skin in the game, whether or not you succeed or fail. You definitely need that as a writer, especially as a beginning writer. But also, for me, I needed to be in an environment like that, but with people who wanted the same goals that I did. And that was definitely useful when I left grad school. So my senior year, it's not really a senior year, but my final class was something called thesis. And we had to put together a big, amount of writing that you had done to be graded on and judged. And that's how you passed the class, and that's how you got your degree. And it was supposed to be an accumulation of everything you had written while you were in the class. And I think I submitted 4 short stories, and I passed. I got, I graduated, I got my degree. But I will never forget, my thesis professor was David Everett, and he said something, I think it was in like the second to last class, or maybe it was in the third to last class. I can't really remember now which class it was, but it was towards the end of the semester. And he said, you're going to have to find a plan for how you get writing into your life, because life is going to come at you, and you're going to get busy. Some of you might get married. Some of you might decide to have children. Some of you are going to get better paying jobs that are more demanding. And some people are just going to stop writing because they don't have the class anymore. And you have to figure out what you're going to do when class is no longer around. And then he said 60 to 70% of you are going to stop writing within 2 to 3 years. And I remember sitting in the class and thinking, no way. Yeah, no way. Really? Really? People are going to stop writing? You spent all this time and energy and money, and you're going to stop writing? And over the years, because it's been 10 years since I've graduated, over the years, I have seen people just fall off the radar and stop writing for various reasons. Some people got sick, some people got busy, some people got married, some people had children. Life will give you plenty of excuses to stop writing. And that's something you have to navigate after you graduate. I was pretty motivated before grad school to go and write on my own. It wasn't really something that I was forced to do, or that I felt like I had to figure it out. Like I was writing no matter what, but I didn't really have a schedule. And when I graduated, I put myself on a schedule. I was writing about 6 a.m. to about 7:30 or so in the morning. That's when I would get my writing in. I was working fully remote back in 2015. So ahead of the curve, I guess. But yeah, my company had gone fully remote in 2015 in January. and I graduated in May of 2015. So I put myself on a writing schedule and just said, okay, in the morning from like 6 a.m. to like 7:30, I'm going to write. And then, I'll stop at 7:15, 7:30 and, get dressed real quick and eat something really quickly and start work at 8 a.m. And so that's what I did for a really, really, really long time. And then the morning wasn't really working for me anymore, so I switched to evenings. And I still kind of toggle between that. Some mornings I get up and I'm very motivated to write before I start work. But other days, it happens at like 7 p.m. But I have seen other people who just things happened and they just stopped writing. And it's interesting too because people that I thought would be selling novels, people I thought were amazing writers, have and I didn't really keep in touch with them. They kind of fell off the radar. But I know other people who are still publishing. They're still getting their books, published. I have a friend who has her book is coming out this year. So it's not really necessarily the best writer that's the one that's going to win. I'm remembering a story right now from the poet Annie Sexton, and she went back to her graduate program. I think it was her graduate program. And one of her professors was like, I'm surprised it was you. You were the one who succeeded, because there were other poets in her classes that were more talented, more driven, it seemed, but she was the one who stuck with it long enough to have the success. And I remember that always really hit me because I realized that in some ways, publishing is a numbers game. It's not necessarily that you're the most talented. It's not even necessarily that you're the smartest. It's that you're the one that persists. You're the one that keeps going. I know a few people who took breaks and came back to writing, and they are self-publishing their books. They are, dipping their toe back into it, and they're succeeding. Not necessarily because they are amazing writers and nobody's ever written but like that before, but they are the ones that said, okay, I've had this break. Now I'm ready to come back. And I feel like I was kind of one of those writers too. I graduated and I was having pretty good success. I had a short story published in 2015. Then I had another one published in 2018. I had another one published in 2019. And then when the lockdown happened, I said, okay, this is an opportunity for me to just stay at home and write. When am I ever going to get that again? So I spent basically from March 2020 to March 2022 trying to write a book. And I hadn't written a novel in a very long time. I've talked about this before, but when I realized that the book was not coming together and it was really kind of failing, I had to take a break. But I knew that I was going to come back to writing. I always knew I was going to come back. And I remember thinking in my head, I don't want to be one of those 60 to 70%. I don't want to be one of those people who just quits writing when it gets hard. Now, that was 2022. So that was 7 years after I had graduated from grad school. But nonetheless, I was definitely somebody who did not want to have writing fade out into the nothing. I wanted to always have writing as a part of my life. I just kind of had to get on track with whether or not I was willing to be a writer and really persist, or was I somebody who was going to just have this as a hobby and I just got published every now and then. And I think I've chosen the first door number one. I have decided to just keep persisting. And so I gave up on that book. It's still a pretty good idea. Maybe one day I'll come back to it with fresh eyes and try again. But I took 6 months off tried some other stuff, decided I didn't want writing to be a hobby. I really wanted it to be like a second career for me. And so I went ahead and I wrote a new short story, and then I started to plan out this novel that I've been writing, all of 2024 and a little bit into 2025. Hopefully, I will, by I think my deadline is July 1st, have a really good draft. Let's call that a really good draft. So, and I'm really, really, again, I really, really is bad words. You shouldn't write those in your book. But uh, like I said in my recap for 2024, I'm very proud that I have written as much as I did. I'm generally a pretty slow writer, so to have as much finished as I already have now is pretty remarkable. And I will not lie, it feels good. It feels good to be producing a lot of writing again. I was trying to think about when was the last time that I had really had so much creative energy. And I had it in grad school, most definitely. I wrote so many stories in grad school, some of which have never been published. And I definitely one day maybe want to get back to some of them. But, it's like, do you work on this new stuff or do you go back to the old stuff? It's like, I don't know. But for now, we're working on the new stuff. But I felt like I wrote a new short story like every 2 months. I was really just churning them out. And I feel like I have some of that back. So I would say that the lasting effects for me from the last 10 years of grad school is that I have felt like number one, can tackle my writing. I don't feel like I need permission to write anymore. I have just accepted that this is part of me. This is part of my life. It will be part of my life until I'm no longer alive. And that the best thing for me to do is to just keep going. If the schedule doesn't work for me, I make a new schedule. If I can't get my writing in this day because I got busy doing this or doing that, no problem. I will do it the next day. I don't beat myself up if I haven't written for 1 or 2 days. And I think that that is really important. When you're in grad school, it is very easy to just have deadlines and goals because you have homework to do, you have assignments to do. Once you get out of school, there's no more homework, there's no more assignments, there's no professor looking over you saying, hey, you need to get this done. You have self-imposed deadlines now. You have things that you are trying to motivate yourself to do. And that's difficult to learn. And some people, like I said, they kind of fell off because I think that they didn't know how to navigate that. But some people walk away and come back. And that's important because when they do come back, they probably have a better realistic idea of what kind of writing and what kind of writer they're going to be. The other thing I want to talk about is publishing itself. My program barely, and I mean barely, talked about publishing. There was no real guidance about where to find places to publish, how to get a literary agent. And from what I've heard, and this is just rumors, a lot of programs do not do this. A lot of programs are very craft oriented and not business oriented. And in fact, if you watch that first video, I talked about one of my professors who told me, you need to start sending your stuff out. You need to start getting submissions, getting your stories submitted. She admitted, she said, this program doesn't do a great job of helping writers navigate publishing because that's just not the focus. It also reminds me of a story. I'm just thinking about it now, although my leg is falling asleep. Sorry, I need to stretch it out. There's problems with sitting on the floor. What the story I'm remembering is from Clarion, actually. Someone asked one of the instructors at Clarion, which if you don't know what Clarion is, it is a science fiction and fantasy writers intensive workshop, 6 weeks in the summertime, I believe. And the the one of the instructors said that there are people who go to Clarion, spend 6 weeks, learn from all of these other people, and they're still not writing publishable material. And that may be true with some people who go to grad school. You can write a great story. You can write an amazing story. It may not be publishable. And there's a distinct difference between that. I don't know if I've said this before, but I will re-emphasize this. Publishers and editors are only going to take stories that they think they can make money off of. If you are pursuing traditional publishing, you have to write stories that editors and publishers feel they can make money off of. This is a business. Now, if you don't want to deal with that, you can self-publish. And I am a hybrid writer. I self-publish and I've been traditionally published. So I love both. But if you're pursuing traditional publishing, and that my program was pushing traditional publishing, you need to realize that editors and agents and even publishers are only going to take your stuff if they think they can sell it, if they think they can make money. And that really wasn't addressed in my program. There was no talk about how to submit your stuff, formatting for your short stories or anything like that. Now, most places will, tell you, we want standard, publishing format, or we do blind reads. Don't put any of your stuff on there. Make sure it's double spaced. Make sure that, there's no identifying stuff for you. Everybody should have a submittable account, blah, blah, blah. So most places will publish, but where you find those places, man, there's tons and tons of resources. But if you're first starting out, you may not know. You may not know where to look. Do you try to send it just to, Cosmopolitan and get it to work? Or, what about a local magazine? Are those any good? It can be very, very daunting. When I was in undergrad, I think that's when I first started submitting to literary journals. Yeah, because I submitted to Glimmer Train. Y'all remember Glimmer Train? I submitted something to Glimmer Train way back in the 90s. And I got rejected. And I had submitted to a couple of other places when I was like, I don't know, 19, 20, something like that. And I just kind of learned on the fly. There used to be a book, and they probably still publish it, but it's not, I don't think it's very useful right now. And that's the Writer's Digest book for short stories. They do one for agents, they do one from children's literature, and a whole bunch of other things. So there are definitely resources, but no one in the program talked about that. Aside from my one professor who, was encouraging me to get published, there was no other professor that mentioned stuff like that. And I believe in one of her classes, this professor that was encouraging me to submit, she did like I want to say like a 20-minute presentation about how you would track your submissions and how she found submissions. And she used the CLMP database, I believe. But there's Duotrope, there's the Grinder, there's other places. I'm not going to get all into like how you submit, but the point I want to make is my program didn't talk about that. And it took me doing my own investigative research, watching a lot of other authors and their experiences getting published, both on YouTube and in person. Because I went to other writers' conferences and, would sit in on the how I got published kind of thing. There might be, I don't know if I gave this book away. I'd have to look on this bookshelf. I didn't really look. But there are some books like this one right here. Let me move. Right here, I believe is Stephen King's On Writing. And he talked a little bit about his experience getting published, getting an agent. But there was a book, I don't think it's up here, but it was the title of the book was called How I Got Published, and it was like 50 stories from 50 different writers about how they got their first book published or how they got their story published. And then, I just talked to my friends and my colleagues in grad school. Oh, where did you submit? Oh, where did you submit? Oh, you got a story published. Like I said, my first story was a friend of mine who was in the program. She graduated before me, and she was doing an anthology and said, "Submit to me." So I was like, okay. And that's how I got my first submission. That's how I got my first credit, my first writing credit. But that is lacking. That is lacking in a lot of programs. So if you want to learn the business of writing, you are better off watching AuthorTube, watching all of the other writers going through it. There's plenty of people who are in the submission phase, who've gotten books accepted. Hopefully, I will be one of them one day. And what that's like, because it is so lacking in a lot of grad school programs. Things may have changed in the last 10 years. I know that programs are a lot more accepting of genre writers now, which is wonderful. But I don't know if they've moved away from being so craft heavy and um, and talking about the business of writing. I really don't know. If you know, please, drop a comment if you've graduated in the last 2 to 3 years from a writing program and there was a heavy emphasis, or at least they touched on the business of writing. But that is lacking, and that was something I kind of had to figure out as I was going through the program, and then especially after I left the program, because you graduate, you get this piece of paper that said you have this degree, and then you're like, okay, I guess I write a book now, or I guess I submit now to all these different places and try and get published. But how do I choose which story to start with? How do I figure it out? Usually what I've noticed is that, at least for the people I know who are getting published, they just kept submitting until something stuck, till it was a yes. Um, Usually it's not the story that you think it is. You're always like, oh, really? That one sold first? Huh. But sometimes that's what needs to happen. You just keep writing. You write things that interest you, things that you're passionate about, and you start to get some momentum. You start to get one story published and another story published, and then life might happen, and you might have to take a break for a while to handle family business or your health or anything around um, your immediate needs. I know for me, I got published in 2019, and then I didn't get another story published until June of 2024. So it was like 4.5 years. Not quite 5 years, but like 4.5 years between stories. And most famously, I remember Octavia Butler had some early success, and then she didn't get another story published for like 2 years. And it wasn't that I wasn't writing, it was just I wasn't getting published. Like I said, publishing is a business. So if you're writing things that people don't think they can make money off of, you're not going to get published. And, 2 of those years, I was working on a novel, so I wasn't submitting at all. So definitely you need to not beat yourself up over the head if you don't have immediate success right out of grad school. A lot of people I know, it took a few years of just slowly getting published, slowly getting writing credits, and still working on your craft, still writing, still reading books on writing, to keep going. I also want to say one of the big things for me that kept me going was that I have a critique group, and like I said, all of us met in grad school, and I think I joined in 2016. Yeah, 2016 is when I joined, and that has kept me going too. I think for all of us, it is definitely something that we really treasure, because it's motivating. when you see people that you went to school with and they are getting book deals or they're getting, publishing deals, it can be motivating because you're like, you know what? If I worked hard too, I will have some success. And when I had my, break, not really a break, but when I had my lull of 4.5 years, and then I got to tell my writing group, guess what? I have a story that's coming out. It was incredibly inspiring to some of them because they were like, oh my God, it happened. Oh my gosh. And yeah, I've been working on new stuff. And like I said, I'm feeling very, very, very I don't like that word, very. Sorry. I'm feeling motivated, to keep going. Not necessarily because this is who I am as a writer, but also I'm building on this momentum of having success and being persistent. It's tough when you're in the middle of that lull because you think, oh gosh, more rejections, more rejections. No, no. But then eventually you hear yes. And I heard yes twice last year. So I'm hoping to hear yes again this year for something, But having a critique group outside of school definitely keeps you motivated. And it, like I said earlier in the other video that I keep referring to, I don't really have anybody else around in my life that is a writer. You know, all of the people that I knew who are writers came from grad school. I didn't know anybody from like my family or my other friend groups that were writers. I just didn't. Yeah. And so having people who understand your struggles and are having, their own issues with writing can be very like bonding. You have this bonding experience of like, yeah, I know what it's like to get rejected for like the 10th time, or oh gosh, that story got rejected and it was supposed to be perfect for that magazine, or oh, I'm not feeling motivated to write today. Don't knock community. Community can be an amazing thing. It's one of the reasons I joined AuthorTube, because I saw these great writers and I was like, you know what, I want to be one of those too. So, and I've been lucky to have a few other writers subscribe to me, and I'm very grateful to them for tuning in. So yeah, don't knock the community that comes after grad school, because you will need it. You will most definitely need it, especially if you're like me and my day job has nothing to do with writing. And so these are kind of the only folks that I have met that are on the same wavelength with me when it comes to writing. And you need that, most definitely. It's also a good sounding board too. If you're, writing stories and you want to do a mini critique group, or you want some beta reader feedback, this is the way to go. This is a great resource. And I think that's why so many of us are unwilling to get rid of it, or not get rid of it, but we were willing to stay in touch because we were like, yeah, being in grad school and having people that are around you getting published, that does motivate you to try and get published. Oh, they got a book deal. Well, you know what? I have this short story. Let me send it out and see what it will do. And for me, at least in the last 10 years, my critique group has been a great, great inspiration. So, what have we learned? Just kidding. I've been yapping, oh my gosh, for 34 minutes. Okay. I don't really think there's anything else to talk about. Grad school for me was a wonderful experience. I met some great people. I was definitely motivated to write, and it did solidify me as a writer. But this is a job that can at times be a little daunting, because you do have to kind of figure out how to navigate it yourself. The good news is, if you have, writing friends, if you, pay attention to AuthorTube, if you look up people's websites and stuff like that, don't forget there are plenty of books out here too, both about the writing life and craft. You just need to continually learn, and don't be afraid to write the stories that you really want to write. Don't be afraid to take a break if you need to and come back later on. This is really a very open ended type of job. Um, there is no way, there is no one way to be successful. There's whatever way works for you. But figuring out that way is something you have to do once you leave that cocoon of grad school. And for some people, they still haven't figured it out. And some people have. And that's the reality of leaving grad school, is that you're kind of on your own, although there are safety things that you can get along the way. So I wish you the best of luck. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. If you have any questions or I didn't address something in this video, please feel free to leave a comment and I will either make another video about grad school, even more stuff about grad school, or I'll address it in the comments. So again, thanks for watching and I will see you all on the next video. Bye.